One of the amazing things about the Well-Tempered Clavier, of course, is that Bach managed to write preludes and fugues in every single major and minor key. And that means that we have to play in some keys that perhaps might not be as familiar or as comfortable as others. We already heard preludes and fugues in C major, which has no sharps and flats, and C minor, which has only 3 flats. Now, however, we're in the world of C sharp major with every single note in the scale sharpened. It's as if Bach is creating the maximum possible distance between where we started out, C major, with no sharps and flats. In 1697, the German music theorist, composer, and organist Andreas Werkmeister foretold a time in the future when musicians would be just as happy to play in C sharp as they would be to play in C. And indeed, this particular Prelude and Fugue by Bach feels almost like the fulfillment of that prophecy. Bach demands the same comfort playing in C sharp major as he demanded playing in C. Perhaps even more, in fact, since this particular Prelude and Fugue is somewhat more virtuosic than that offered in C major. So, as a keyboardist, the fundamental question that comes up in playing in these slightly more exotic keys is, how do I choose my fingering? Now, if we want to choose some kind of historical fingering, then actually we're on somewhat shaky ground. There are relatively few sources that discuss fingering for keys with more than a few flats and sharps, particularly around the time of Bach. However, what I'd like to propose today is my own sort of personal solution for dealing with music like this. And there are 2 primary principles that we can discern. The first principle is that rather than the earlier practice of avoiding the thumb on raised keys, we will instead be very happy to use the thumb on raised keys, i.e. sharp and flat notes, as a way of gaining a more comfortable and ergonomic hand position. And the second principle we'll follow is what's sometimes known as position fingering, in which we adopt a stable hand position for consistent and significant units of music, usually corresponding to a certain number of beats that together form one musical idea. In position fingering, after we change from one unit to the next, we also shift our hand position to accomplish that change. As an example of this put into practice, let's look at the beginning of the prelude. From the very first chord, notice that we have to use the thumb on a raised key, G sharp, in the right hand, in order to adopt the most stable and comfortable hand position to play these C sharp major broken chords. Later on in the prelude, Bach introduces a more scalar figuration in both of the hands. And again, there are a variety of ways that we could potentially make this work at the keyboard. The fingering that I've chosen is, as I mentioned already, position fingering. And so you'll notice that I adopt one stable hand position for the bar, and then when I move to the next bar, I shift my hand to move to the next stable hand position. And again, this isn't the only way to make this work, but I found that it's the method that works most easily for me. If you're a keyboardist, I hope that you'll be able to try out some of these techniques when you're playing music in some of these more far-flung keys with lots of sharps and flats. And I hope it's useful for you in approaching this music. If you have other ideas about fingering that you find work really well for you in keys like this, please feel free to mention that in the comments.